A gifted student, blinded by greed and pride, betrays the very master who taught him everything. But the higher he tries to climb, the harder he falls, because karma always finds a way. In the heart of a small, mist-covered town, there lived a teacher whose wisdom was known far and wide. He was patient, disciplined, and kind, a man who had dedicated his life to sharing knowledge. Many students came and went through his doors, but only one showed a talent so sharp it seemed almost supernatural. That student was Adrian. From the moment Adrian entered the master's workshop, his brilliance shone. He absorbed lessons faster than anyone else, his hands moved with precision, and his ideas dazzled everyone who heard them. Yet behind his gifted mind, something dangerous lurked: ambition without gratitude. Adrian wanted more than knowledge. He wanted glory, recognition, and wealth. But what truly set the stage for betrayal was not just Adrian's desire, it was the whispers of others. Villagers often compared him to his master, saying, "The boy may one day eclipse the old man." Instead of humbling him, those words became fuel to his pride. He began to see his teacher not as a guide, but as an obstacle, and in the silence of his own heart, he started to believe that destiny was calling him, not to follow but to overthrow. The bond between student and master was already beginning to fracture. Adrian's progress became the talk of the town. Merchants praised his work, villagers whispered of his intelligence, and even travelers sought to see the prodigy. At first he gave credit to his master. "Everything I know I learned here," he would say with a modest smile. But modesty soon became a mask he wore. While inside, pride was taking root. He began to compare himself with the man who had trained him. He thought, "Why should I stand in his shadow when I am the one people praise?" The master, unaware of the storm brewing, treated Adrian like a son. He shared stories of his youth, spoke of failures that taught him humility, and tried to instill patience. Adrian listened with half an ear, his thoughts already racing toward the future he believed was his. He began to imagine crowds chanting his name, nobles offering him gold, and history remembering him as the greatest of all time. One day, when a wealthy noble praised Adrian in public, the boy did not once mention his master. It was the first visible crack in their bond. The townspeople noticed it, though no one dared speak. The master, however, saw it clearly, and sighed, for he knew ambition without restraint often ends in ruin. One evening, when the workshop was empty, Adrian lingered behind. The faint glow of lanterns lit the shelves, casting long shadows across the tools. His eyes wandered toward the master's private chest, a wooden box bound with iron where the most precious scrolls were kept. These scrolls contained advanced techniques, knowledge built over decades, meant only for a student truly ready to bear their weight. Adrian's heart pounded. Curiosity turned into temptation, and temptation into a dangerous resolve. He pried open the chest, telling himself it was only for a glance. But as his fingers touched the parchment, hunger overwhelmed him. He devoured each line, copying what he could, burning the images into his mind. Every stroke felt like stealing fire from the gods. "This is my right," he whispered to himself. "Why should I wait when greatness is within reach?" The act was more than theft, it was betrayal of trust, of the sacred bond between teacher and student. Yet Adrian convinced himself otherwise. He called it ambition, destiny, even justice. Closing the chest, he walked away with a smug smile, unaware that he had just taken the first step on a path that could never be undone. Adrian's work suddenly grew more refined, more complex, and the villagers praised him even louder. "The student has surpassed the master," they declared. Though the master had nothing, the old man smiled quietly, but in his heart he felt a sting of sorrow. He recognized the stolen knowledge in Adrian's creations, the movements, the details. Those were secrets Adrian was never taught. Still, he chose silence, waiting to see whether Adrian's heart would find humility. But humility was far from Adrian's mind. He strutted through the streets, basking in praise. He began dressing more lavishly, speaking with a sharper tone and accepting commissions in secret. When gold slipped into his hands, he felt powerful, almost untouchable. He even began avoiding his master, claiming he was too busy with important projects. The villagers, blinded by his brilliance, flocked to him, yet cracks began to appear. Though his work dazzled at first glance, it lacked depth. The master saw it, but the people did not. Perfection takes patience, the old man thought, and patience is what he refuses to learn. Arrogance had wrapped its claws around Adrian's soul, and the boy could no longer see the dangerous cliff he was walking toward. During the grand festival of the year, a wealthy patron announced he would reward the most skilled craftsmen with riches, land, and fame. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. Adrian's eyes lit with greed the moment he heard. "This is my moment," he declared. "I will prove I am the greatest." His voice carried through the square, filled not with hope but with defiance. The master, standing nearby, placed a hand on Adrian's shoulder and spoke softly. "Skill without humility is an empty victory. Do not let pride blind you, for it will cost more than you can imagine." But Adrian pulled away, his face hardened. For the first time, he no longer saw a mentor in front of him. He saw only competition. He mocked the warning, saying, "You had your time, old man. Now it is mine." The words cut deep, for they were laced with contempt. Villagers who overheard the exchange fell silent. A hush spread through the crowd, for they sensed that something sacred had been broken. The betrayal was complete, though Adrian did not realize the weight of the words he had spoken. From that day forward, destiny began to shift, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. Adrian worked day and night, pouring every stolen technique into his creation. He told himself that this masterpiece would make history. His hands shook with both excitement and greed. The townspeople visited often, watching the young genius at work. They whispered of his brilliance and spread tales that he would surely win. Adrian basked in the attention, but in his obsession he forgot something vital. Techniques were not just about skill, but about wisdom. Without the guidance of his master, the balance was off. Still, he pressed forward, blind to the cracks forming in his work. The town square filled with crowds. Merchants set up stalls, children ran with laughter, and musicians played joyful tunes. At the center, a grand stage displayed the works of craftsmen. The master stood quietly among the crowd, his eyes calm but heavy with sorrow. Adrian arrived with his masterpiece covered in silk, his chest puffed with pride. When the moment came, he unveiled it to the world. Gasps filled the air. It was stunning, delicate, intricate, seemingly flawless. Adrian smiled triumphantly, convinced karma had no hold on him. The judges circled the piece, whispering with admiration. But as they examined closer, their brows furrowed. A tiny flaw, a structural imbalance invisible to the untrained eye, had begun to show. The crowd couldn't see it yet, but the master did. His eyes softened with pity. Adrian, oblivious, raised his hands to claim the applause. He believed victory was already his, but destiny had already placed the first crack. As the sun reached its peak, a loud snap echoed through the square. The masterpiece trembled. Before anyone could react, the entire structure collapsed in front of the stunned audience. Gasps turned to silence, silence turned to whispers, and whispers became laughter. Adrian stood frozen, his pride shattering with the work. The very knowledge he had stolen had betrayed him. The flaw was not in the material, but in the heart that used it. The wealthy patron shook his head and turned away. The judges, once impressed, now dismissed him. The crowd, who once cheered his name, now mocked his arrogance. He was too proud, they said. Adrian's cheeks burned with shame. He searched for his master's face in the crowd, but when their eyes met, he saw no anger, only quiet sadness. That silence hurt more than the laughter of the villagers. After the festival, Adrian confronted his master, desperate for answers. "Why did it fail? I did everything perfectly." The old man looked at him and spoke softly. "Knowledge without patience is poison. You took what you were not ready to understand. You betrayed trust, and now you have learned the lesson only life could teach." Adrian clenched his fists, refusing to accept the truth. But deep inside, guilt began to stir. Adrian could no longer face the townspeople. His name, once celebrated, was now a subject of ridicule. Commissions stopped coming, friends abandoned him, and his wealth drained quickly. He tried to rebuild, but every attempt failed. It was as if an unseen hand blocked his path. He cursed fate, not realizing it was his own choices that had summoned this curse. Desperate, Adrian traveled to distant towns to sell his work. At first, strangers welcomed him, but soon the same flaws appeared in his creations. No matter how much he tried, something always went wrong. A crack, a break, a collapse. Karma followed him like a shadow. He grew restless, bitter, and angry, blaming everyone but himself. Nights became sleepless. Adrian replayed the moment of betrayal again and again. He remembered the chest, the stolen scrolls, the contempt in his words. Regret began to eat at him like fire, yet pride still chained him. He could not bring himself to kneel before the man he had wronged, and so his suffering grew heavier. Meanwhile, the master quietly took on another apprentice. This student was humble, hard-working, and respectful. The town, once filled with whispers of Adrian, now celebrated the new apprentice. Watching from afar, Adrian felt rage mixed with envy, but beneath it all he knew the truth. This was what he had thrown away. One rainy night, Adrian stumbled upon his master walking home. The old man greeted him kindly, as if nothing had happened. Adrian, soaked and trembling, demanded, "Why do you still look at me with kindness after everything I did?" The master smiled faintly. "Because hatred is another poison, and I will not drink it, but you must decide if you wish to remain chained or free yourself through humility." Adrian collapsed to his knees, sobbing. Years of bitterness spilled out. For the first time he admitted aloud, "I betrayed you, I stole, I destroyed myself with my pride." His voice cracked, his body shaking as rain washed over him. The master placed a hand on his shoulder, not as a sign of forgiveness but as an invitation to rise again. Yet he added, "Only you can walk the path of redemption, I cannot do it for you." Adrian chose to start over. It was not easy. He humbled himself, working simple tasks, sweeping floors, carrying wood, and learning again from the ground up. The villagers mocked him, but he endured. Slowly, his heart softened. Knowledge returned to him, but this time he treated it with respect. Each mistake became a lesson, each failure a teacher. Years passed. Adrian never regained the fame he once craved, but he gained something far greater: peace. He no longer sought applause, only mastery of himself. His creations, though simple, were made with sincerity. Travelers who stumbled upon his work felt a quiet beauty that fame could not touch. Adrian had finally learned the secret. Greatness is not in stealing knowledge, but in living it with humility. The story of Adrian spread quietly through the land, not as the tale of a prodigy, but as a lesson of pride and redemption. People whispered, "The ungrateful apprentice was broken by karma but rebuilt by humility." And though Adrian never returned to his former glory, his journey became a warning and an inspiration to generations that followed. Remember, betrayal may win you a moment of power, but karma will always claim its due. If this story touched you, don't forget. Subscribe for more tales of betrayal, justice, and redemption.